Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
Masterpiece Theatre,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
Masterpiece Theatre,
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
Masterpiece Theatre. Masterpiece Theatre.
Welcome back to the Lost Signals reviews, the AFI 100. Today we are discussing how war never changes. The year is 1943, and the Japanese Imperial Army has marched into Burma. They're building a railway using Allied soldiers for
POWs.
POWs for construction. We are following their story, known as Bridge on the River Kwai, for which I thought for the longest time was over.
It was a point of contention until the movie cleared it up for us.
I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Scott Thurlow.
How goes it?
Stephen Demosi.
I look forward to serving with you, gentlemen.
And Chris Morgan.
Yeah, notice it, Harry.
For now.
Scott, let's start with you with the funny log line, and you can move right into plot.
All right, so yeah, we've bounced on a number of them, but I think we settled on I love it when a bridge comes together. And so, given that, yeah, the plot is a English battalion, a small contingent of English soldiers has been surrendered to the Japanese army forces on Burma, and they are going to join the prisoners that are already there in the efforts to basically force labor, build the aforementioned, the titular bridge, if you will. So that happens for a while, and then also in between there, one American soldier escapes and is given then a secret mission in combination with a sort of British undercover services contingent to go back to the camp and blow up the bridge. And those two storylines sort of converge, and spoiler, the bridge does indeed get blown up. That's pretty much it, and it has a lot of commentary, which we'll get into, but that's the plot. So here's the thing. This movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and it feels just about that long. It's a good movie. The plot is fine. It was well done, except we noticeably felt like the time sort of dragging. I felt as if they could cut some of the scenes shorter, maybe cut out a part or two here and there. So I'm going to give it a very solid 2 in terms of plot, but I just think it's not as tight as it could be. And I know we've been saying that a lot, but I think it certainly applies here.
So I didn't know anything about this film going in. I mean, I knew it existed, but beyond it,
you've never actually seen it. Yeah.
What surprised me was that this is a satire that I would equate to Catch-22, with being kind of anti-war, about the absurdity of the war machine, and it's a British comedy, not in the sense of it
not
being
slapstick though or anything,
over the top kind of Benny Hill style, but there's a lot of subtle humor. There's a lot of scenes that I think are purposely dragged out in order to for the attempt at a joke. It doesn't always work.
Yes.
A large majority of this does work, and I found the movie hilarious. But you're absolutely right. There's sometimes the melding between serious war film and
sort of dry satire
comedy, because they have and they're almost 60s kind of swinger type vibe scenes with the American.
Bill Holden's Bastards Over Burma.
Yes,
but yes, but it's again, that juxtaposition between serious war and the absurdist element, again, works for the most part, but there are times it doesn't. And I think that was what you were referencing to, the parts that make it feel long.
Yep.
Yeah, I found it in a similar vein as both of you said. It was a movie that seemed to drag out, and full disclosure for me, I'm a little bit tired tonight, so perhaps if I watched it with a little more energy, it would have been not better, because it was, as you said, it was a really good movie, and it really talked a lot about as you say, and as we'll go into in themes and stuff, like the absurdity of war, and there were a lot of really interesting scenes. There were a lot of very cool shots and depictions of what was going on in this camp, but a lot of scenes just seemed like drawn out.
Yes, exactly.
And perhaps that's a relic of the time, and how kind of films were made more so then than they are now. It's a little more
bit more
frenetic usually these days. Like you want more action, you want more cuts usually in movies that are coming out now, and this one kind of just lets scenes linger for a while, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does make a movie feel like it's 2.5 plus hours long.
I feel like I should have liked this movie more than I did. It was, I'm going to say the ending did a lot to redeem it. I didn't really get a lot of the satire because I'm a person who doesn't mind long movies. I like a lot of minutia. I'm okay. I happen to like a lot of movies that people think are boring. I am a big defender of 2001. Some of my favorite Star Trek are bottle shows, which people think are boring. I agree with Scott that the pacing on this was just, I was fine before we walked into it. And like about halfway through the film, I'm like, will this thing just end? And we paused it and we were like, oh, we have an hour and a half or hour 40 minutes left to go. And I'm like, oh God. When it was funny, it was great. Now looking back, I thought it was supposed to be more of a serious film than satire. But I actually became more and more involved as it went along. I am going to, against my better judgment, probably give it a 2 because I wasn't really fond of it most of the time we were watching it, but I thought when it hit on all thrusters. I thought the ending was really well done. And, I'll give it a 2.
Now, one, I think that people started enjoying it a lot more when people stopped attempting to make jokes over the movie.
And the movie make their own jokes.
Yeah, and because you had mentioned that point, movie's really unintentionally funny. I'm like, no, the movie's purposely funny. It's that people haven't been quite paying attention the entire time. But to that point, though, I think one of the major issues with this is that instead of having an A and B plot, which they do 2 full A plots.
Yes.
Yeah.
That converge eventually. Yeah.
One is dealing with Aggregate, who portrays the brilliant colonel who's driven mad by by kind of what he's grown up to be and his need to be like the perfect soldier.
Yes.
Or the perfect British soldier,
exactly.
I would say.
Yeah, yes.
The colonists, we need to build this railroad, not because even though it helped the Japanese, because we got to show them up, we got to one up.
Yeah. The British pride. British pride.
And then you have the American was the other plot, and that almost felt like they took a side character and what perhaps should have been a B plot and just did a full movie on him as well.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. He should have definitely been the B plot.
Yeah. So
that's a good point.
I think that's the main flaw with this movie is that they dwell too much on both ends.
Yeah, well, when they went to that resort or whatever it was, when he escaped Burma, it's like he escaped, and all of a sudden you kind of feel like you're in a Bond movie where he's on the beach.
Yeah.
He gets, he literally walks out of the water. Some blonde comes up to him, and then he's just like, "Want a martini?" It's just like, really. So, I mean, looking back on it, I get the absurdity more. But I agree. They spent way too much time with him. They should have his cuts there should have been only military. They should have started his discussion when he went and talked to the major who basically sets him on, or is he major? I wasn't sure. The lieutenant.
Doesn't matter.
But whoever sent William Holden on the mission, that's where his scene should have started. They should have just given that one line of expository dialogue. Hey, you escaped from Burma, blah, 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 blah.
They had to set him up as a ladies' man.
No, they didn't have to, but they decided to.
That was kind of insufferable.
Again, it would have been a kind of funny, reoccurring gag. They dwelt on a couple of things, too.
Well, it kind of was when they got back to Burma with all the women helping them out. And
I guess, but that wasn't necessary. So, yeah.
Looking at him adoringly. And
sure. So I'm going to agree with Steve-O. Like, yes, we said this about movies of this nature, that the sign of the times, it's just going to be like longer. I think it was like 2 hours, 20 minutes. That would have been fine. Like you can trim off here and there, like you guys just said, and that would have made again just tighter, more condensed. And something was weird is happening behind. Sorry. So yeah. So either way, though, I'm still sticking with a solid 2, but certainly not a 3. But I don't think it's weak enough for a 1 either.
Yeah. I'm gonna stick with a 2.
All right. Yeah, I think that's 2s all around.
Yep.
All right. So I'm on to themes. There are a lot of interesting themes that go into this film, and you're dealing with the dynamics of power and, in a sense, like what it means to be a soldier, what it means to have victory in war. What's the purpose of war? Is it just like I think it's the perfect exemplified between the Japanese commander and Al Guinness's colonel in the thing where they're just a large majority of the first act of this work involves basically pissing contest between
a power
the two
struggle
of them.
between them in a sense. Yeah.
Is Al Guinness attempting to do this to benefit his people? No, he's doing it because the Geneva Convention said that officers shall not work. The Bushido Code says that they can. So it's just the conflict between the two, and he suffers greatly in this like hot box type thing. Yeah. He's being tortured in order to like just win this one psychological battle. Yeah, and it seems very petty. And I think, and the point of this is that war inevitably is about petty activity.
Exactly.
And the two plots converging, where one is like over the bridge, where it's yes, it's a Japanese bridge, but there's a sign on it saying this is the pride of the British, like
built by British soldiers, etc.
And another British with an American, but a British squad coming to blow it up. I mean, they're just dealing with the absurdity of war, the absurdity of rank, for all of the glory that the different that they try to ascribe to rank in this. You have the American who is lying about being a major,
basically impersonating an officer. Yeah.
Well, you've done enough good that we're basically making you a major. So
the simulated major.
And I like that he was one step ahead of him too. It's just like, oh yeah, we've known about your rank. We you know.
And it doesn't matter for all of their bravado and all of their like we are great because I'm a colonel, or like we have all these rules we have to follow. The rules matter only until it's convenient to discard them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry. One last thing is that I took an ethics of war class, and I always felt chagrin at it because it's like you're arguing over little details that really don't apply when you're actually in the face of war.
When it comes down to it, yeah.
And I think that this does a good job of bringing up that point.
Well, it directly meant, like, you know, plays to that when he, after the entire, first hour of the movie, is refusing to let his officers work. As soon as they run into a problem with the bridge, he gets his officers to work on the bridge.
Yeah, it goes to the infirmary, and it's like, hey.
And gets the sick men to work
Which is something that the Japanese commander wasn't willing to do.
Yeah.
Right.
What was interesting, because we had just watched Band of Brothers last week, and one of the things in one of the rules of war, which I always think is
an absurd statement.
Yeah, was don't shoot the medics because, regardless of whatever side it is, okay, it's basically you could shoot these people until they fall, and once you see the medic, you can't shoot at the medic, which I always find interesting. So it was interesting here that the medic had to essentially, for somebody who was throwing up the Geneva Convention at the beginning, with the Alec Guinness's character basically going against it to get this, and it was a matter of pride. It was a matter of he survived this, and I think he felt an air of superiority over the Japanese commander, whose name I'm blocking now. Saito. Because like he beat him on this, and he was beating him on the psychological warfare, and he all of a sudden he got this sense of pride, and he became obsessed with this bridge, and he was just like, well, when we take this over, it's going to be a British bridge, and
the best British bridge ever.
Yeah.
It's going to be the British POW camp for British soldiers.
Exactly.
Ever. I mean, he totally did lose sight of it, and I think this. I mean, talking about themes now, I think I like the movie more in retrospect as a piece of art that we could discuss, as opposed to actually sitting through it. If that makes any sense.
No, I feel I get you, and I think what I'm going to say about themes is that I think you brought it up, B, that if you can see the parallels to something like Catch-22, like it's all there. Like it addresses, again, it's a satire, absurd like version of the events of war in its one little instance, and it's very well handled. It's very dry in a sense of its humor, but it has serious dramatic parts as well to it, which I think are very well juxtaposed with each other. So yeah, it handles it well, even though it is commenting on upon again the pissing contest nature almost, and again, like as you said, Chris, the absurdity of having rules within a war.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it integrated all those things very well, and I'm going to give themes a pretty strong one.
I think it's important to mention that Nicholson, Alec Guinness's character, continues to progress in his singular drive to build this bridge, even past when the bridge is done, to the point where he tries to stop British officers from
Saboteurs.
blowing up the bridge, and when he realizes what he's done, he in his
single-mindedness,
as he's dying, he falls upon the plunger that actually blows up the bridge at the end.
Ironically, he's the one who blows up the bridge technically.
Yeah.
But his dying move, sure.
I think that's important to state in terms of this, because that's the logical conclusion of what happens with his character.
I mean, he does have that moment of realization as he's dying when he gets concussed from the mortar shell.
Yeah.
It was like, what have I done?
My God. Yeah.
Well, he couldn't have done anything else because he had talked about, the fact that he didn't resent his life. He
did have that speech at the end.
He's like, I've been in the army, or I've been in the military for 28 years tomorrow, and I've been home about 10 months out of the whole time, and I don't regret a day of it. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, he's looking over the bridge and kind of, you could tell that he's kind of conflicted with it, and that this bridge he's basically put everything into this bridge. I mean, he's built his career, he's built this bridge, and he doesn't really have a lot to show for it. So yeah, here's this bridge that, he I don't know how else to say it. It became a point of pride for him. It was a symbol of hey, after 28 years, I did something that it can stand as a monument, which is why he put
it was proof to him that his time in service was worth something at the end of the day. So
I had to work that out, connect all the little dots in my head.
I feel
and the Japanese commander who's a very prideful person too, but I can't hurt the British in any way that they won't hurt themselves twice within their madness. And having the doctor there too, the medical officer, who is trying to be the sane, rational person here and dealing with these two complex prides.
He's almost the audience surrogate, not quite, but the most ground. He's the one who can step back and just look up again the chaos and disorder of war, and I think the final line he says is madness. This is madness.
Yeah,
and that's pretty much. And it cuts to credits. So yeah. So I'm regardless, I'm giving themes a pretty strong one.
Yeah,
everything you said.
I am too.
I still
Go ahead.
I still think Catch-22 as a novel is much stronger for this. But
but it's going for the same.
Well, you'll have to read the Bridge over the River Kwai. The novel.
That's true.
Bridge on the River Kwai.
It is based on a novel.
What was fascinating to me was everything that this film inspired, all the films that and things that riffed off of this this movie. I mean, this film itself is the inspiration for many scenes and many things and many tropes.
It's been referenced a lot.
Yeah, this is one of those seminal films that I can understand, why it's important, why it's on the AFI.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, Chris, continue talking about the antagonist.
The antagonist is very difficult because I'm trying to decide if the antagonist was Saito or Alec Guinness. Because Saito is the antagonist initially, but as we were talking about before, Alec Guinness was doing things that even he wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like his pride. So, I mean, it was a matter of it was a pride-filled attrition game between Saito and Alec Guinness's character, and it was funny that at the end, Alec Guinness took Saito and said, "Oh, look, something's going on," and he dragged him out there to show him the wire. And then when he was after Saito died and William Holden had died and the Canadian accountant had died, and basically the motors and everybody was dead, he's like, oh my God, what have I done? To me, that was like his moment of redemption. So I'm going to kind of say that the antagonist went from Saito to Alec Guinness's character.
I think you answered your own question. Stubborn pride might be the antagonist. And you might say, and I might have also done this abstractly, war itself, of course, the absurdity of the theater of war.
It's not war. It's the mechanics of the army. In Alex Guinness, in Saito, they're very similar characters who have devoted their entire lives to the war machine. Saito will kill himself if he doesn't get the bridge done on time, because that's in the military culture.
Mission.
That's what he has to do.
No,
Guinness's character is willing to be tortured before he gives up the pride that it's. So that goes to Brett. But if you look at the second A plot, you have the American soldier Shears, who keeps trying to get out of the war, and it keeps dragging him back in. And like the idea of like, I love the one thing where the one character in the parachuting, Shears is up, never parachuted before. It's like, 50-50 shot. We're just going to throw you out there. He survives. The one guy who's an expert,
the most experienced,
gets his next step.
Yep.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to say so much war machine, but it was nationalist. They're both nationalists.
I mean, it's all tied together, I think.
Because if you think about it, like that's how you motivate people to do things like this. It's nationalism that, like for the flag, for the king, for the queen.
Sure. For
whatever
the
it is.
or sector,
blah, blah, blah. It's like, so the military is a symptom of of a greater nationalistic statement.
If you want to go debate I think that the war machine promotes the nationalist perspective because it needs it to find people to send into war and sacrifice needless wars.
Right. It's its own vicious cycle, which I think might be the best thing we can say that the antagonist is. And character-wise, I do agree, Chris, that at least initially the film sets up Saito to be, of course, the villain who is enforcing his rule under the British POWs and so forth. But then Alec Guinness almost becomes like a worse war taskmaster in that sense. But I think I'm going to do my traditional abstract route and pretty much like combine the abstract things that we just said, the vicious war machine that churns out nationalistic pride that thus feeds into itself and so forth. So
what we're saying is nationalism and war machine are the serpent that eats itself.
Yes.
It's like they need each other.
The Ouroboros.
I'm not saying that at all. You guys are taking my words there.
No, I mean, I
think
know
the root of
you're coming from one side of it and I'm coming from the other side. Let's just say
we'll agree to disagree.
So
what do you think, Steve?
So like we were talking about Saito, and he is initially set up as the antagonist, but he is an incredibly weak antagonist in this, if you're looking at him in that role.
I agree with that.
He basically just lets himself get rolled over by Alec Guinness after a while, because he realizes it's the only way.
Well, he's outmaneuvered by him.
Well, it's the only way to not kill himself, basically, is to let this guy take over.
He's a better monster,
I guess. Yeah. So yeah, right. Nicholson is a better monster than him, perhaps. Which whatever. I think, Ian, you're probably more towards what I'm thinking, in that like the military machine itself is kind of the antagonist here, and allowing all aspects, all of these people are either allowing themselves to drive the machine to the much to the chagrin of many of the other people in this movie, including
who are being driven by it. Yeah.
Including Shears, gets caught up in the wheels of the machinery, and doctor, I forget what his name is, but he comes out and looks upon the madness with complete horror in his eyes, and at the end of the movie, and I think that's kind of what this film is going for in terms of antagonists. And to be honest, I think that's stronger than any single character in this movie, to me, and in my opinion. So
no, I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing at the end of the day. I'm just, the way I phrased it perhaps was a little unclear, but I do think antagonist deserves a one, and it is a more abstract, the military industrial complex and all the negativity that that generates. So
So that's ones all around.
One's all
I
around.
believe so.
Yeah.
All right.
But I'm going to go with nationalistic pride.
Okay.
I'm taking the other side of the serpent.
That's
no,
fine.
no, no.
That's fine. You don't have to explain it
We're
again. We
agreeing
heard
to
you the first time.
disagree. But I'm kind of more down on politicians than I am on soldiers. So,
Fair
and that's
enough.
always been something of mine.
I'm not. So
Moving on.
we're going to get into a vicious thing. Since the war pigs have come a calling, Stephen, what is protagonist?
So I'm going to say about protagonists in this movie what I often, or fairly often, I guess, say about antagonists, in that this movie doesn't really have a strong protagonist and doesn't necessarily need one because everyone is an antagonist pretty much. Like, there's nobody that's free of blame for the things that happen in this, except maybe the doctor, but you know, he's not a particularly strong protagonist. He's at best a supporting character.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that there's a protagonist in this movie, to be honest. It's kind of all about how war makes monsters of everybody. And yeah, so it's going to be a 0 probably for me, not to the detriment of the film, but feel free to try and convince me otherwise if you don't agree. But
No, I agree with you 100%. I'm giving it a 0.
Yeah, that's well said. I don't have much more to add because that's basically how I viewed it. I think the film wants you to view it that way. I think they're going for that effect. Like they don't necessarily. None of them are particularly sympathetic because of the very fact of the things we just said. So because of that, it's sort of like
I'm not even saying they're not sympathetic. Like, I'm somewhat sympathetic to
they're
everyone
less so
in this
than
movie, but
sure.
they're bad protagonists. That's
Like you
for
said,
sure, to
maybe
me,
maybe the
in my
doctor
eyes.
is like the most like the audience like POV sort of character, or at least
Right.
like the one you can identify, perhaps given all the other characters and what they're doing. But I think the point of it is to, in fact, highlight that what you just said. So that means like there is no real protagonist in quotes, and I think I would often say a default 0. I think this is a purposeful like choice, so therefore I'm going to give it a stronger 0. But not that it's a bad move; it's just that that's the nature of the film and the story.
Yeah.
For the most part, I agree. I would say perhaps there is an argument to be made for the Shears, because he's not really a bad guy in
He's
the
like
sense
he's
of
like
what-
Yo-Yo Sarian, as I said, as a reference to Catch-22. But
yes, and the thing is, like, it's in a way, if I were going to make a guess of what his character is about, or why he's in the film, is that he's the American hero. He gets all the ladies as he goes across. He has,
But he's also kind of a
swagger.
bumbling idiot, like at some points too.
the American hero.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And then he goes and he ends up getting killed, trying to like save the day, but fails
To finally
miserably
do
to
something,
it.
yeah.
So I think that he is the closest to a traditional protagonist because it's
Yeah.
a satire of the traditional American protagonist.
I like that. I like that interpretation, but I'm still going to give it a 0 overall. But I do like that's a good point to raise about his character. So
I do agree with that. I think he is the closest that it comes to a protagonist, and I think I'm going to stick with a 0. But that he is. I mean, it's
he's exactly what you just said. It is
the fact
Sure.
that I didn't immediately think of him when thinking of protagonist, and, or not that I didn't think of him, but like that I
thought of
didn't
others
necessarily
first.
consider him a protagonist.
Because he's he's a purposely ineffectual protagonist.
Right, exactly,
Mm.
and that's that's the whole point, is to undermine all of these standard like war tropes that were going on before this.
Yeah.
in the same, probably in the same, or somewhat in the same way as like Catch-22 or like similar movies that came out at
Exactly.
the same time. Sorry, Chris, did I cut you off?
No, I agree with you. I'm going to give it a 0.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to give it a 1, but you guys make too strong.
I don't think it deserves a 1, like I said. So
Scott supporting.
all right, so perhaps this is another interesting one because I think the medic is the best supporting character, at least the most important, perhaps. As I just said, he somewhat is, again, the most rational person in the situation, as he observes like all like the ridiculousness and the escalation of what the other characters are doing and what they're enacting. But I think also there's some other good ones. For example, the leader of the little British unit who recruits the American Major Shales or whatever his name was, the American guy who was trying to shirk all his duties, trying to get out of the war. So I think he was a good character. He had some of the best lines, which we'll speak to in dialogue shortly. So he was good. I enjoyed him. And like everyone else, like, they all rounded it out, I think, in a well done enough manner that I think they collectively deserve a 1, even though I'm going to pick out the Doctor as my favorite one of all amongst them. But I think they're all solid enough, and like even like the sort of like grunt soldiers on the ground, like the POWs who are are building the bridge and they're giving commands, and when Alec Guinness takes it over, he somewhat whips them more into shape than they were. So there's a pretty big cast, but amongst like characters who were given screen time, I think they all, like even Joyce, like the Canadian guy, the young private or lieutenant, whatever, who was recruited for the little team, their covert ops. Yeah, so he was fine too. He wasn't characterized to a great degree, but he wasn't also flat. So I think all I'm saying is my argument is they all deserve collectively a solid 1 overall.
I agree, and I think that a lot of the secondary cast either satirizes British culture,
good point,
or military culture,
or both at once.
Yes,
or American culture.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I mean a couple of I suppose Shears' lady friends.
It's just like if you want the American stereotype, he's on the beach, he just survived this thing, drinking a martini.
Yeah.
I mean, it's excess. And then I was kind of surprised that if this was an English film, that one of the most humble person was the Canadian guy. Considering that Canada can sometimes be considered a joke with England.
I think it could be considered a joke everywhere.
I was trying to be nice.
I think we're trying to go away from that stereotype, but
we live in New Jersey and we're often the butt of the joke. So those of us who get the butt of the joke can always joke about other people. So yeah, Canada.
Sure, we can sympathize.
Blame
with that.
Canada.
I think that I don't know about this one. I'm
wavering.
Probably closer to a 0 at this point.
Okay.
I liked some of these characters. The medic is good. Joyce is fine. Not super.
Sure.
He doesn't have a ton of depth. There were a bunch of characters that we spent a lot of time with that had absolutely no characterization at all. And by that I mean anyone who is Asian in this movie except for Saito and
briefly at the beginning with one like colonel, like underling of his.
I can't remember the women that were traveling with them
and the one guy
are in the credits credited as Siamese girls. And then all of their names are after that. So like
it's a bit of sign of the times again, but that's
sure. But like there are all these like these are fairly important characters.
Right. I'm not trying
in
to
the plot, or they should be. Like they travel with them the second half of the movie, and like they are the reason that they get to their fucking destination.
How many actual Siamese girls were left behind by British? After they forgot about them, they lumped them together into one whole group and went back to their British wives.
What does that mean that the movie should not have any focus on them?
I was trying to justify.
It's a facetious argument. Yes.
So I kind of hoped that, and the guy that was traveling with them,
their guide, like
their
the local
guide
native
had
guide,
like no characterization at all. Like I was kind of hoping to get a little bit about those characters. I think that would have been interesting. Saito, while he's an interesting character, definitely is just his characterization pales in comparison to Alec Guinness's character. He's mostly just confined to looking sadly off into the distance,
forlorn glances,
a bunch of the time.
For the second half of the film.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they kind of faked you out a couple times. You thought he was gonna kill himself for one reason already. He cuts off a lock of his hair and
his top knot or whatever. But he's an interesting character. Again, the same type of thing. I wish I had gotten more from him. Even though I don't necessarily put him in the supporting part. I think he's like a pro-tag, antag type of character. But it took this bunch of characters and they're in fucking Asia, and they took every Asian character and made them way less important than every white person, which, yes, is a sign of the times. But I would have loved to see a little bit more about those characters, who they were, what was going on with them. They're an important part of the movie.
Sure. Absolutely.
And the other characters, I think the only one that really stood out to me, even Joyce was kind of wishy-washy. The only one that really stood out to me was the doctor. And perhaps the guy that recruits Shears. And they're good, but they're not
still not enough for you.
Good enough to make me give it a 0.
Fair.
Or to give it a 1. So I think I'm going to stick with a 0 on that.
I think it just gets there for me, like I said, collectively, even though the two standouts were the ones we both just said.
Right.
So on to dialogue. I thought this was a very funny movie. I was laughing quite a bit, both visually, which will go into the style, but dialogue-wise, I know some people will disagree with me, but there's a lot of subtle humor to this, and I really enjoy it. I think the standout scene, as we mentioned, is when he gets back into the medical, the British like kind of rest medical area, and the dialogue there is really great, especially as being recruited for the mission.
Snappy.
Very British.
Exactly.
And I think that's when people started actually paying attention to the film, where the people were watching it with. That really was one of the scenes that captured interest.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it landed about an hour into the film.
Took a while to get there.
But again, overall, I was laughing quite a bit throughout the entire thing, so I'm going to give it a 1.
No, I agree. Like it's like we mentioned, it's a dryish. It's a satire at the end of the day, like for the most part. So it has some it does have like snappy jokes, but it also has its drama. And when serious scenes were happening, I think the dialogue was well done in that too. Like, so yeah, overall. And I think it's funny because I mentioned to you precast that this is the movie where doon 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 like that little tune is from, and you said something like, "I'm gonna give style 1 automatically because of that." So like, yeah, so if you ever seen that as a reference, this is where it's from this movie. But to the actual dialogue of the film, you're right. Like it's very sharply written in order to deliver those sort of like commentary, like the lines and the jokes that are there about it. So yeah, it all flows along very nicely, and each character's interactions with each other and the situations they find themselves in, I think, flow very well. So I'll give a solid 1.
I actually really like the dialogue in this movie a lot. It's probably going to be my strongest one.
Yeah, okay.
I think the like pip pip cheerio, like British
chin up, keep calm and build the bridge on.
Like all of that style dialogue mixed with like in the B plot, with the American like gruff attitude is pretty good, and not only that, but in the first plot where they're building the bridge, like Alec Guinness's scenes with pretty much everyone are awesome, and he's a great actor, so he's gonna deliver. But like some of his scenes with Saito are really good, and he gets to deliver a lot of really good speeches throughout this movie.
That's true.
So yeah, I really like the dialogue a lot. I'm going to give it a super strong 1 for this.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Chris?
I'm going to give the dialogue a 1. I just wanted to clarify that for supporting characters, I'm going to give it a 1, just to make sure you knew that.
Sure.
And the reason I'm tying into that is because I thought the supporting characters really had some of the best
some good
lines.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, if we're going to say that this is 2A plots between William Holden and Alec Guinness, that the connective tissue really, really, really came down to the supporting characters, and their dialogue really came down to it. And as a matter of fact, I actually started liking William Holden's character more and more as the film went on.
We noticed
because,
that.
well, the thing is, he developed more heart. He was not just this.
Right, he became more well-rounded. Like,
yeah, he wasn't just kind of like this frivolous, like, No, go on. I'm having a...
Actually, to your point, though, like, his heart gets him killed. He won't leave behind the older colonel or whatever he was.
He's been
and the colonel ends up mortaring him in order to make sure he
leaving him behind.
Yes.
Yeah.
He spent the whole movie trying to get away from the war. At the end of it, he has a change of heart almost and gets killed for it.
But that's, to me, is one of the ending of this film. I mean, I was wavering in and out because I thought, because it had pacing issues, I felt. But the thing is, the reason I felt that the ending really redeemed a lot of it for me was because it all came together. It was very tight. It was, I don't mean to bleed over it. I don't mean to bleed over into style, but I'm just saying that it's the dialogue. The ending had the least amount of dialogue, but also in a lot of ways, through whatever there was in the moment, I added to the verisimilitude, obviously, but it really, we became to a point where less was more, and it was just, the dialogue's getting a very strong 1 for me. Supporting characters getting a very strong 1.
Well, keep talking. Oh, sorry.
Actually, one final thought. You just made me think of this, Chris, as you were saying that.
Stop talking.
I mentioned it before, but the doctor has a final line, and he looks around at the devastation. The bridge is blown up. The train has crashed. Everyone's dead. He just goes, madness.
Yeah.
And that's it. So
Mad war.
It's mad war. But like, yeah, so I think that encapsulates
Mad Doc.
Yeah, it's a little final coda to everything we said. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm giving dialogue a pretty strong one.
So,
Sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
Style.
You.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, seriously, honest to God, if it weren't for the third act, I was going to probably give this a 0. But because I did find a lot of what they had tedious, and I know what they were trying to go for by design for a lot of what they were doing. I thought it had various degrees of success, but the ending really held my attention every moment. And I kind of saw Alec Guinness's betrayal coming, but Rich, a friend of ours, we were watching the film with, and as soon as Alec Guinness went down there and it's like, Colonel, Rich is like, you fucking asshole. I'm like, well, I don't have to say that because you said it. But by that time, I was so invested in it, and I knew he was going to do that, and I knew why, because of this, the pride he felt for the bridge, that he kind of got lost, that he considered this more British property. He didn't realize what he was doing. And it was just, in like we were talking about William Holden's character, who wanted out the whole time, his heart got him killed. The accountant, like they were telling him how to like use a knife. And at the end, William Holden's like, kill him. And he does the right thing. And then he ends up getting...
He kills him.
All right, he kills him. But what I'm saying is strategically, I'm not saying in terms of like, I approve of people stabbing each other.
Right.
I mean, strategically in that situation.
Stabbing in wartime.
Well,
Yes. I actually don't know. But
well,
go
yes,
on.
I do. There are some people you metaphorically want to stab, or maybe literally not going to stab. I'm not putting words into anybody's mouth, but situationally.
oh, there's people.
Let's get.
Go on about style.
But I thought the last act was perfection. It held my attention in every single way, shape, and form. And the thing I do not understand, this thing you guys said won best score, and I really don't understand why. The music to me is highly unimpressive. But I hate whistling. Stop.
It's an
Stop.
earworm.
I'm going to throw something at you. But what I loved is the absence of music. They used the ambient sound. The people were whispering except for Saito and Alec Guinness's character. And you would hear the train in the background getting closer and getting closer. The absence of music was such the right move to make. You had the tension without having to have a score with it. I cannot say enough about, for a movie I was kind of wavering on. I think the third act was just magnificent.
So I like the style a lot. If I'm looking at just it's it as a genre piece. It's a comedy. I think I found it very funny. It's as a satire. I think it's one of the better satires I've seen out there. Again, not as good as Dr. Strangelove, but a few things are. However, like again, it's also a decent war film, and
yes,
I think that they use their environment quite a bit. So there's something I used to notice from older movies where they would find something interesting in the area, like a tree full of bats, and like would just film that for a while, and then insert that into the film for no particular reason aside from like
it looks cool. It's a good shot. Yeah,
you're kind of getting the feel for the setting.
Yeah,
sure.
So.
The one thing I liked, you talking about the bats made me think about it, was when they were talking about building the bridge and they were on the little raft and they were talking about, you could see the guys in the back swimming, like they're like, I'm in the water anyway, I'm going to take advantage of this. And I wasn't sure if it was the actors or if it didn't matter, because to me, regardless of the situation, whether I was acting in the movie or whether I was working, I would take the fucking opportunity to swim. And it's like those little details.
There's a juxtaposition there between what the actors in the forefront are saying,
yes, and what's happening,
the activity behind them. That's the comedy. That's
exactly. And like that's a good sort of exemplifies like why I think the style is well done in this film, and everything you said about the way it is within the genres is true. But I think, like, I usually, first and foremost, go to the actual cinematography, and I think it was very well shot. They had some great shots. They gave you the film does a very good job of giving you a sense of place, and it happens to be a World War II film that isn't set in Europe, right? So it's like, it's a different little, it's a Pacific Front. So you don't see that, you didn't see that as often, at least, especially back then. So, and beyond that, like, I see what you mean about the the score, Chris, but also, as you said, the absence of a score sometimes highlights, like elevates some scenes, for sure. So all that, and yeah, like the ending, let's say 10, 15 minutes, certainly is a like an exclamation to the end of it that it culminates in what the film has built up leading up to it. So yeah, I think overall I'm going to give Style a pretty strong 1. It was well done, and I enjoyed it throughout, and it hit all the points that it needed to, given for what kind of film it was.
Yeah, I agree. I think Style was very strong as well. I think that the cinematography was pretty top-notch in this as well. There were some really interesting shots throughout the movie. One that I just go back to is the one Nicholson and Saito are on the bridge, and like just the way that whole scene is shot is really cool.
Where it's framed, yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah, and like when he drops the stick off the bridge and it splashes into the water, that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, you guys have said a lot about the style. I don't think I need to belabor it, but
you
I
do
thought
agree?
it was really, I thought it was really well done,
Yeah.
style-wise. So I'm going to definitely give that a 1 as well.
Alrighty.
All right, continue talking with recommendation.
I will continue talking with recommendation. This is a movie that I would recommend watching. I think that it is, this is the first time I've ever seen it, and honestly, I need to think about it more, and I would like to watch it again. It's something that I think that I probably missed parts of upon first watching, especially in terms of like the deeper, like satirical meaning of a lot of the things that are said and done throughout the movie. And I would like to check it out again, maybe read up a little bit about it more, and check it out. It seems like an important movie of the time. You know, I wasn't
For sure.
there when it was made, but it tells a lot about what was going on at that moment in history that it's about, and I'm sure it tells a lot about what was going on in the moment in history when it was made as well. And yeah, I mean, go if you haven't seen this movie. Well, you should probably see it before listening to our review, but if you haven't, go watch it and
You'll see why we like
do yourself a favor.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think if we didn't mention it in full disclosure, if you will, I was the only one who had seen this film previously to this. So in my mind, it was like a more famous, like more people have seen it, but obviously that may not be necessarily true. But obviously I do recommend it because, as you said, Steve-O, it was an important film at the time. It won a lot of, in fact, awards. Funnily enough, we were speaking about the Academy Awards. So we happened to watch this one. It won like a number of categories, including Best Film. But as you said, yeah, it's an important film both back then for what it had to say, and I think it still stands now. And I think it's definitely well worth a watch. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out. And if you have, maybe give it another watch. It's been about 12 years or something like that for myself since I've seen it previous to this. But yeah, it still stands. It's still solid. And it has something to say, which still resonates. So,
funny enough, I had never seen this movie before. I was really excited to see it, and I was kind of let down by it. Initially, I did not get the satire. I went into it thinking it was a serious war film. And a lot of World War II films
sure,
were, in a lot of ways, not Yankee Doodle kind of like, I mean, you watch any of the World War II films, and they're kind of propaganda where you have this swashbuckling, carefree. I mean, you do kind of have the James Bond kind of character for the soldier.
But he's a parody of that.
Right.
Even.
When again, I just watched Band of Brothers, which has a verisimilitude, which you really get to see what goes on with these people, and it's not like we're not trying to live off of World War II. We're not trying to, feed this thing. So I went into it thinking, I'm looking at this, I'm going, oh my God, this is just everything I think it would from a World War II thing. And I'm like, this line is really funny. This person's absurd. And now looking back and as a piece of satire, I'm like, okay, this is still it's got pacing problems.
Yes,
but
it's absurd.
but it is absurd. I would probably see it again because I want to look at it with a different set of eyes. But I have to, even if I didn't like this movie, I liked it more now that we've talked about it than I did when we were watching it. But even if I didn't like it, I would definitely recommend seeing it, if for nothing else, because it is so ingrained in in popular culture. I mean,
That's a
you
fair
watch
point, yeah.
anything from like I Love You to Death, Parks and Rec, anything like that. People are watching this film. It's always on TV somewhere and anything. And so I'd recommend it, but I just wanted to put out there right now that like this discussion, realizing what it is, the film starts to gel a little more for me than it had when I was watching it.
Sure.
So I like British humor, and I am hugely anti-war. This film was right up my alley.
Yep.
Although I had a hard time at first. Every time I heard Oscar's voice, I was thinking Ben Kenobi.
Yes, we did
But,
make a
yeah.
joke or two here or there about that for sure.
If you strike yourself down, you will become more more
Etc.
powerful than you'll possibly imagine.
If you go into a
I
hot
think
box,
this is a very good film, and if you like the Catch-22, Doctor Strangelove, the anti-war type satire pieces, I think you'll like this as well. It's handled very funny, not perfect by any means, but like
Yeah.
fairly good work.
Pretty top notch, sure.
I agree.
All right,
So where does that leave us, sir?
3 8 and a 7 with Stephen Rossi as the curmudgeon on this one.
Wasn't he the curmudgeon on Doctor Strangelove too?
I don't know about that.
Go back and check
Pretty
out
sure
Dr.
I gave that a
Strangelove.
10.
But he's
No, I think
certainly
you give it a 9.
he's certainly the Alekinus of our
Of the night.
podcast.
Yes.
Um,
So what's that come out to?
that goes out to
So
7.75.
build me a goddamn bridge already.
All right. I'm getting there.
If I build a bridge,
No, I'm Jonathan Menzer, and I'm the swaggering John Wayne American stereotype. Here with Scott Thurlow,
Madness. Good night.
Stephen Ramosi,
Stiff upper lip, boys.
and Christopher Morgan.
Wakanda forever, live long and prosper.
What? Camera.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
Masterpiece Theatre.
Join us again next time, won't you?
Masterpiece Theatre.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
Masterpiece